digital soldiers.
One more round.
In the criminal justice system, the people are represented by two separate yet equally important groups: the police who investigate crime and the district attorneys who prosecute the offenders. These are their stories.
Artuso, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and will faithfully, honestly and impartially, discharge the duties of office
during my continuance in office.
Congratulations.
Does that look like the housing inspector?
Sort of, kind of, man. I gotta see him in person, man. Pictures ain't accurate enough for me.
You know his name?
I don't know his name.
Can you describe him for me?
No, I really can't.
Why do you know he's the housing inspector?
Because I see him in the neighborhood a lot. I can't describe him, but if you be like, that's him.
White guy, black guy?
Yeah, he's white.
Male?
White male, about 5'10", about 175 pounds. We're gonna do it like this, like that.
And you know him to be the housing inspector?
Yes, I see him around. I've been seeing him around for years.
What drive?
Blue Focus, or what is that? Ford, whatever. What is that? Red, I don't know. It's a blue something. Scooby is in the wind. He told me. Day after.
He got some money, man. It's burning a hole in his pocket.
I'm gone, Jay. He said I'm about to take care of a couple of people, and I'm gone. That's what he did.
Did you see him after that, though?
I see him that same day.
Does he usually float around that neighborhood?
Yeah.
Do you think he lays his head somewhere in that neighborhood? Or?
Man, Scooby Brown is not, he might not even be in Ohio right now. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, we don't see you in any trouble at all. You're just a good witness.
That's okay.
What we're looking for from you and your family is merely cooperation. I'm going to tell you right now, John Artuso, that's who we're looking at, okay? Right now, you're not even under Miranda. You're simply a witness. You are a witness, okay? We're only interested in John right now.
No, that's what I'm trying to understand you. When you asked me a question, I gave you the answers. We're not looking to get you in trouble. Your mom, your dad, Scooby. The only person that has a problem right now is John. Your mom and dad, nobody's looking to get them in trouble. We're not looking to get you in trouble. We're not looking to get Scooby in trouble. We're not looking, that's not our intent. There's one person, and that's Mr. Artuso.
Checked us out, set him up. Are you seriously going to say that? Sure, are you going to say that? Just setting you up? That's right. You said that he had told her this whole thing that was going on with him was a setup set up by the police. They just want to get him. She said she backed up and pulled out. I don't know.
I mean, he swears to God he didn't do it. That's all I know.
Jennifer, I've been involved in a lot of criminal investigations where the people who didn't actually do an act wound up catching charges, third-degree felony charges for obstructing because they weren't truthful, and you're not being truthful.
When you talked to him, he did not say to you, just tell the truth. He did not what that conversation was.
Yes, he did tell me to tell the truth.
We're just trying to do our job and do this investigation. Don't stick with the guy who you, I think now have learned, has done some horrible things.
There's no way, John, they have all this and you are being set up or whatever. You've had to done something.
And I know you don't know us like you know him. And so you want to believe
Honestly, I don't really know him either.
Agreed. And I get why you're allegiance because you know him better than you know us. But We're trying to tell you we know that you have not told us the truth, that some of the things that you said here, you've said differently to other people on the outside, and we're really trying to come to you very honestly and say, please just tell us. It's not worth for you to go down in your life and have your life.
Okay, what do you want to know?
Is it true that what he said to you was just tell them the truth?
No. Yeah, he did tell me to tell you guys the truth. He was set up. That's what he told by who. He won't tell me. He said he was set up. His lawyer had him on gag order. I tell you nothing about the money because he's not told me nothing except for he's being set up, and he won't tell me by who because he's on gag order. I don't know nothing about that money. If I did, if I knew where I'd give it to y'all, could just get me the hell out of trouble up here all the time. But he said he was being set up, so I left him alone.
Well, I just want to throw this out there that if you knowingly withhold or otherwise try to hinder our investigation, you could be criminally charged.
We have you on record of 100 times denying that you know. So if we're able to prove that that's different, then you'll have to answer to that. We've given you plenty of opportunities.
I'm not worried about answering it because I don't know nothing about this money.
Don't jeopardize the things that you hold close to you. Close to you.
I got set up from the word go. You have to believe me. I did not do what they said I did.
Hands up! Let me see your hands.
He was trusted by thousands of people who let him into their homes. A city housing inspector is facing new charges tonight, but not in the case he originally made headlines for. John Artuso is in jail at this hour after being indicted for kidnapping and rape.
Late last year, he was accused of taking more than $250,000 from inside a vacant home. Channel 3's Docina Drakeford live with those allegations and how they have a bizarre connection to today's charges. Good evening, Docina.
Good evening, Russ and Sarah. Now, after we ran that story about the allegations against Artuso and the vacant home and the money that was stolen, a woman came forward saying that Artuso targeted her, but this time it had very little to do with her home. This is Ashtabula Housing Inspector John Artuso, someone Mary Almonte knows pretty well.
Even inspected my home. I think he's a pretty decent guy.
But he's accused of doing some dirty deals, accepting money for passing home inspections, soliciting prostitutes on the job. For years, investigators were looking into him. Then the lid was blown off when $250,000 was found behind a fridge in this vacant home. And Councilman Reginald Holman and Artuso were said to have split and pocketed some of it. When we spoke to him earlier this month, Holman said it didn't happen.
Did he ever say to you, hey man, I found a bunch of money back there?
No. I basically found this out to the street. People said that I was counting it, but that's not true. I mean, I kind of wish I had $260,000, but I don't want it that way.
When that story went public, more accusations about Artuso's past came up. A woman came forward claiming that in September, during what was supposed to be a routine home inspection, Artuso raped her.
Well, you think you can trust people that are coming to your house to work for the city? I mean, I can't even begin to imagine.
You rape a woman? You are absolutely a piece of garbage. You're below that asphalt right there.
Today, a grand jury did find enough to move forward with rape, kidnapping, and sexual battery charges.
Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is going to hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
One step at a time, one punch at a time, one round at a time, one step at a time, one punch at a time.
I hate it you see you getting like mangled and embarrassed.
It doesn't matter how this looks to other people. I fight.
So what we'll be calling on is blunt force trauma. It's not will to hurt
the biggest underdog story of our time is back for one final round.
Their fraud has been exposed, and the credibility of those who push this hoax is forever broken. and they've now got big problems.
One more brother. One more brother. One more brother.
Frankly, of all the cases I tried as county prosecutor, this was the only acquittal that I had. So I wasn't happy with the acquittal. Who would be?
Okay. Chief Stone, my name is Joseph Scott, and I have the privilege of representing John Artuso in a civil action that's been brought on his behalf. And we've asked you to come here today so that we could ask you questions relative to the allegations that have been raised in that complaint. You understand that?
Yes.
Okay. Am I correct, at least, and let's just talk about, we're here today concerning an investigation of John Artuso that was conducted by the Detective Bureau 2017 through 2018, culminated in a trial in September of 2018. You're familiar with that investigation, correct?
I am.
Okay. During that time frame, did you have any concerns as to whether or not Lieutenant Saletti, who was then commander of the Detective Bureau, was properly meeting his responsibilities?
I know that I had some discussions with Lieutenant Saletti about his performance, yes.
Okay. What were your concerns regards Lieutenant Saletti's performance as commander of the Detective Bureau during that time frame?
I'd say that I could sum it up with one word: laziness on his part.
Thank you. Lieutenant Dibble, it's my understanding that in 2017 and 2018, Lieutenant Joseph Saletti was the commander of the Detective Bureau. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And to your understanding, was his practice similar to your own?
No, sir.
Okay. How did it differ?
I don't think that he took the initiative to be involved with the employees under him.
So you do not believe that Lieutenant Saletti was engaged with the other detectives the same way that you are under your command?
That's correct.
Were you aware in 2017 and 2018, were you aware of any concerns regarding how Lieutenant Saletti performed his duties as commander of the Detective Bureau?
Yes, sir.
And what concerns were you aware of?
The various things were not getting done by him that should have been completed by him. The only other thing I could say is you could just never find him.
Not engaged in work duties, though?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, the initial investigation concerned an alleged theft of money from an abandoned building that had been inspected and condemned. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then Judy Smith subsequently came forward after a story was published in the local newspaper concerning that. Is that your understanding?
That's my understanding.
And so Judy Smith obviously filed a very different kind of complaint involving an alleged rape, correct?
Yes.
Okay. It's also my understanding that the two investigations were run together under the same case file number. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any concerns about running the two investigations together under the same case number?
That's not something I would recommend.
Okay, why not?
They're two separate matters that are not related, and normally and typically we would run that as two separate investigations.
Okay. Were you aware of that fact that the two investigations were being run together under the same case number at the time that those investigations were ongoing?
I was not.
Okay. Is that something you learned after being notified of this litigation?
Yes.
Okay. That was brought to your attention?
It was.
Okay. During your tenure with the Ashtabula Police Department, have you ever been assigned to the Detective Bureau?
2 hours.
Okay.
I was assigned for the Detective Bureau, and then I was removed because I was going out on FMLA leave.
Okay. As a lieutenant with the Road Division assigned to Day Watch, did you have any supervisory responsibility with respect to the Detective Bureau?
No.
Officer Blinkus may at times have been doing Detective Bureau work and road work. Would you have any supervisory responsibilities over the work he was doing with the Detective Bureau?
No.
What's been previously marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 1 appears to be an Ohio Uniform Incident Report concerning an investigation involving a number of things that are listed on the cover page. You see that? unlawful restraint, rape, strong arm, grand theft. You see that?
Yeah, yes, I did see that on the first page.
And your name appears as the approving officer at the bottom. Do you see that?
I do.
And is that your badge number, 0043?
That's my CAT ID number.
CAT ID number, okay. And then a date of 1/30/2018. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay, did you actually approve this report?
No.
Okay, have you ever seen this report prior to today?
This is the first time.
Okay, let me ask you this, and I didn't ask you this early. Did you do anything to prepare for today's deposition? Did you look at anything?
No.
Before coming here? Okay, and so you would not have looked at this incident report prior to coming here today?
This is the first time I've ever seen this report.
Okay, so you did not approve this report, correct?
I did not.
Okay, and as we look through the various pages, and I appreciate there's a number of pages here, Lieutenant, your name appears, I won't say at the bottom of every single page, but certainly on a lot of these pages, we have your name and CAT ID number and the date of 1/30/2018, correct?
Correct.
And that approval and date appears despite the fact that some of these entries post-date the date of January 30th, 2018. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay, some of this work activity is dated as late as September of 2018. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay, so you couldn't possibly review in January of 2018 work that was not performed until September of 2018, correct?
My actual promotion date was shortly before this, and a lot of this investigation, from what I can see, took place before that. So I was never privileged to this information or this report before, during, or essentially now, even after.
It's my understanding that former Detective Felt was the lead detective for the investigation. Was that your understanding as well?
Yes.
Mr. Felt, did you ever discuss with the chief or anyone else any concern that the Ashtabula Police Department was investigating an Ashtabula auxiliary police officer?
No.
That wasn't a concern as a potential conflict of interest?
No.
You understood that Mr. Artuso was an auxiliary police officer, correct?
I do.
Since Mr. Franklin's not here, I'm going to ask this question to you, Mr. Timonere. There's been conflicting chatter on who's investigating Mr. Artuso. Are you able to tell us, is it our agency or is it an outside agency?
It's a joint effort, but an outside agency is doing it.
Is there any update you're able to give us at this time?
At this time, not during the investigation.
Okay.
Now, the newspaper article that appeared in the Star Beacon, did that involve an allegation of theft of money from an abandoned building in Ashtabula?
Yes.
And did that specifically name John Artuso as a suspect in that theft investigation?
I don't remember if it did.
Okay. But your recollection, your understanding is that that newspaper article prompted Judy Smith to come forward. Is that fair?
It is.
Did you have any concerns that Judy Smith had been prompted to come forward and make a statement against John Artuso after having read another article that implicated Mr. Artuso in another investigation? Did that concern you at all?
No.
Mr. Felt, I want to hand you what was previously marked, I believe you have a copy in front of you, as Plaintiff's Exhibit 4. Mr. Felt, am I correct that Plaintiff's Exhibit 4 is an affidavit for a search warrant that was executed by yourself in connection with a request for a warrant to search Mr. Artuso's home? Is that correct?
It is.
Okay. And this was executed in conjunction with the alleged theft of funds from the abandoned building in Ashtabula. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. On page 2 of that, paragraph 3, sir, you reference over the course of the last 2 years, your affiant has been tasked with a confidential undercover internal investigation involving a city of Ashtabula employee, John F. Artuso. Do you see that?
I do.
In the next sentence in paragraph 3, you state John Artuso has been involved in proven criminal activity for solicitation of prostitutes while on duty for the city of Ashtabula. Do you see that?
I do.
What proven criminal activity were you aware of on December 13, 2017, when you signed this affidavit, that proved that Mr. Artuso had solicited prostitutes while on duty for the city of Ashtabula?
There was Patrol Officer Tom Perry came to, I don't know who he reported it to, but ultimately Officer Perry had observed John conducting activity which is consistent with solicitation of prostitution. When Doug and I were out conducting surveillance on no drug houses or whatever, we happened to see John in areas that were had high activity for prostitution.
Well, did they also have high activity for code enforcement?
But possibly, yes.
He was the code enforcement officer, right?
Yes.
And then the next sentence, you say John Artuso has alleged to have been involved in public corruption as the housing inspector for taking cash payments from renters of households so that the residences can pass a housing inspection. Do you see that?
I do.
To your knowledge, was Mr. Artuso ever charged with a crime of taking such a bribe to pass a rental inspection?
No.
Did you keep a file of this confidential undercover internal investigation?
I don't know if a file was kept by Doug, but I personally did not.
So, do you know the specific work infraction that Mr. Artuso was supposedly disciplined for?
I don't.
Well, do you know if it was specifically criminal activity?
I don't.
During your time in the Detective Bureau, were you ever aware of a 2-year investigation sometime around 2015 to 2017 involving John Artuso?
No, sir.
During your time in the Detective Bureau, prior to 2017, are you aware of any investigation that established proven criminal conduct by Mr. Artuso?
No, sir.
Were you ever aware of any ongoing investigation, 2-year ongoing investigation involving John Artuso that would have occurred between the period of time of 2015 and 2017?
No, I couldn't classify it as anything as an ongoing investigation. No.
Okay. Was Mr. Artuso ever charged with a crime?
No.
Prior to the investigation of this offense, were you aware of any ongoing investigation of Mr. Artuso by Ashtabula police officers acting in an undercover capacity?
I was not. I am not.
So you really didn't have a basis for saying that Mr. Artuso had been engaged in proven criminal activity when you signed this affidavit, did you?
Correct.
Well, why was it important to include that information in a affidavit to obtain a search warrant regarding an allegation of theft of money?
I don't recall.
Okay. Well, was the intent here to portray Mr. Artuso as a bad actor?
Again, I don't remember.
And this is, am I correct, this is the affidavit that was relied upon by the court to issue a search warrant for Mr. Artuso's home, correct?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Phil, let me ask you, have you seen Plaintiff's Exhibit 7 before?
No.
Okay. I've heard this referred to as a TUI letter. Are you familiar with that terminology?
I'm not.
Okay. This appears to be a summary of Agent Fortunato's earlier discussion with Judy Smith that preceded the interview. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
Okay. And in this summary, on the bottom of page 1 of the actual summary, not the cover letter, but the summary that follows, Smith estimated that in her phone call with, or her discussion with Fortunato, estimated that the alleged assault occurred August 14th or 15th of 2017. Do you see that?
I do.
Did Agent Fortunato tell you at any time that Judy Smith originally claimed that the assault occurred in August of 2017?
I don't recall that.
Okay. That's important. information, though, isn't it?
It is.
That would be completely contrary to what Judy Smith said in her video recorded interview, correct?
Yes.
And as an investigator, that would cause you to doubt the credibility of what you're being told by that witness?
Yes.
Now, the actual video recorded interview of Judy Smith, I believe, occurred on December 19th of 2017. Does that sound about right?
It does.
Okay. And in that interview, do you recall that Judy Smith initially reported that the alleged assault occurred in November of 2017? Do you remember that?
I can't remember if that's what you said.
About how long ago did this happen?
The 15th.
Of what month?
November, I think.
Of what month?
November, I think. Wait. I mean, my sister Liz, that's when I text her and asked her and trying to find her text. I had to tell her yesterday what happened, and she said I should have went back with you, Judy. And I said, no, I said I wasn't heading. I just went up to the store, Liz. Like, come on, I can't go to the store.
It's not anyone's fault. To John.
Oh my God, don't try. Oh, my son blames himself. He said, Mom, that was my fault.
You shouldn't. That's not right. I mean, you should be allowed to be in your home with the housing inspector coming in.
It was the 15th. She still went at 9:30. Yeah, it was 15th.
Of what month?
September.
Of September.
Yeah, it was September 15th.
Of this year?
Yes.
Okay. That's important information, though, correct?
Yes.
Again, that would be completely contrary to the date she finally settled on of September 2017, correct?
Yes.
Okay. In fact, she twice said November of 2017, correct?
She did.
Okay. Now, do you recall that Ms. Smith reported that she had destroyed the clothing that she was wearing at the time of the alleged assault?
I do.
I threw all my clothes away because you don't want to look at that again. You don't want to put that around you again.
And would I be correct that by the time Ms. Smith reported the alleged assault, you did not have the ability to collect any forensic evidence, at least from a physical examination of Ms. Smith? Is that fair?
Yes.
So, at the time of this interview, am I correct, you had a complaining witness who could not present you with any forensic evidence, correct?
Yes.
And you had a complaining witness that could not accurately recall the date of this alleged assault. Is that fair?
Initially, that's correct.
Well, and if we look at the date that she gave Special Agent Fortunato, she actually gave 3 different dates, correct?
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
He left out the back sliding doors that day. Okay. My son's got a baseball bat in that door because it was broken. He removed it, and I was so scared when he removed that baseball bat. I didn't know what he was going to do. I really thought something, but he just walked out.
Like your son had it to hold the door closed? Yeah.
Yeah, and he just walked out.
Am I correct that no one visited the scene of the crime at any time in December of 2017?
Correct.
And am I correct that neither you nor any other detective involved in the matter in December of 2017 went to the Bunker Hill apartment complex to see if you could locate any witnesses who may have observed or heard any part of the alleged crime? Is that fair?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Well, but detectives did go to the scene in September of 2018, almost 8 months later, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so apparently it had some evidentiary value in September of 2018, correct?
There was a request from Nick Irochi's office to test the functionality of a sliding glass door.
Had opened it for years.
What's wrong with it?
It's you know how sliding glass, the old school big heavy sliding glass doors had them rollers on the bottom.
Yeah.
The rollers are pushed up into the metal, and it's to the point where the metal has dug a hole in the track, and you try to open it, all it does is open like that. So you can't get out of it. Should have been replaced, but Joe was, you know, that kind of landlord.
Did the attorney and John, did they try to open the door?
John did.
Okay.
And what happened when you tried?
Same thing as it always does. The top of it will open, but the bottom doesn't slide at all.
Can somebody
It,
get
like,
out?
tips.
Can somebody get out through that opening?
No, because it only opens like that far totally, and the door's like this, and it's like halfway up. So you have to hold the door back and climb out at the same time. I don't find that possible.
Okay.
You get squished by the door. It's heavy.
Mr. Brown admitted to you that he and Deshaun Hunt took several $1,000s from this abandoned building, correct?
Yes.
And spent it.
That's correct.
And there was no question about that. They admitted they took this money from the building and spent it. Correct?
Yes.
And it was on the order of $15,000 between the two of them, correct?
Sounds right, yes.
I already know. I'm going to tell y'all straight from, this is my point of view of what happened. Yep. So, like I told you, I looked, tried to get in and see, and everybody kept crowding around. I went beside Scooby Brown like this. He handed me some money. Miss Holman looked at me like, where you come from? I said, you're absolutely right. I ain't supposed to be here. And I walked out, jumped on my mini bike and went home. When I got home, it was about $10,000. I bought the truck, paid up my bills, and got my kids what they wanted. I ain't gonna lie to you, I spent that shit up. I know I got the receipts for everything y'all want to see. My truck, everything. I'm back. I want to be broke again. Fuck it. Let me pay my bills. I wanted a truck for this winter. It came through. I'm blessed. I'm sitting on my ass. And people getting it all fucked up talking about I said I was going to buy a house and a truck. No, I was going to finish paying my house off and get a truck.
I'm going to get this other table. People coming in and out to get different stuff. Well, as I'm ordering, when I lean over like this here, when I look at, they never looked in the bottom of that cardboard box. It was an envelope like this with some money in it. When I saw it, I grabbed it, because I was homeless at the time. I grabbed it, and when I looked up, Mr. Hunt saw me. I just reached in like that. I didn't look at it. All I did was grab some money, give it to Mr. Hunt, put it in my pocket, kept moving the table. That's how it happened.
We don't see you in any trouble at all. You're just a good witness. That's
And were they ever charged with a crime for taking money from this abandoned building?
Not to my recollection, no.
Do you know why not?
I don't.
Am I correct that two individuals actually admitted to taking money from that building and spending it?
Yes.
Mr. Harrison and a Mr. Hunt?
Yes.
Okay. But they were not charged with any crimes, correct?
Not that I'm aware of.
Why was that?
I don't know.
Do you know if any criminal charges were filed against anyone other than Mr. Artuso?
I don't believe so.
Do you know why that was?
I don't.
Do you know if anybody removed any personal property from the building other than for the purposes of donating it to Goodwill or anybody else?
Yes.
Okay, who removed property?
Mr. Artuso mentioned there were a few items that he took from the property.
And when was that?
I don't know exactly the day.
Would that have been prior to his being placed on paid administrative leave in December of 2017?
Yes.
Okay. Did anybody else take anything from the property?
I don't know.
Did you take anything from the property?
I was there when something was taken from the property.
And what was that?
A pizzelle maker.
Okay, who took that?
Mr. Artuso and I.
I'm sorry?
Mr. Artuso and I.
And you? Okay. And so as Mr. Artuso's direct supervisor, you didn't have any problem with that at that time, correct?
I guess I didn't.
I'm sorry?
No, I did not.
Did you advise Mr. Timonere that you had allowed that to occur back in December of 2017?
No, I did not.
I recall money being obtained as a result of a search warrant from Adam Holman's residence.
Okay.
I cannot, and I'm not saying that it's not the case, I just can't recall whether money was obtained from Mr. Artuso's residence.
Okay. Now, part of your investigation into the theft also involved executing a warrant on the property of then City Councilman Holman, correct?
Yes.
And as a result of that search, the investigation located cash, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And that cash was believed to have come from this abandoned building, correct?
Yes.
And uncovered some recent purchases, correct?
Yes.
They purchased a new vehicle of some kind.
Yes.
Fairly expensive vehicle.
Yes.
Do you remember what it was?
It was I don't remember the year, it was a Lincoln Navigator.
Okay. From your investigation, you believe that that vehicle was purchased with money taken from the abandoned building, correct?
Yes.
Did you make a comparison of the currency recovered from Mr. Artuso's home with the currency recovered from Mr. Holman's home?
No.
Well, wouldn't you have to do such a comparison to determine whether or not those funds were consistent?
That's reasonable, yes.
So you think that money's been sitting there 7-8 years at least, right?
Man, I'm thinking 10 or something. You gotta look at the currency and see. That money.
The newest marking.
Thinking.
Still spent.
Yes, the fuck it did.
Was Mr. Holman ever charged with a crime?
No. No.
Do you know why?
I do not.
And were you involved in the seizure of funds from Reginald Holman's residence or his family's residences?
No, sir.
No.
I was not there.
Okay. Did you ever receive any of that money into the evidence room that was taken from them?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And do you recall anything about those funds?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry?
Yes, sir.
What do you recall?
Well, I just had to return that money here recently to Mr. Holman, and it was all old money.
And was that money returned to the Holmans because a court determined that the money had been illegally seized?
Yes, sir.
Damn! Did you ever ask to interview Mr. Artuso?
No.
Okay. To your knowledge, did any detective ever ask to interview Mr. Artuso?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Did you ask to talk to him in conjunction with the theft case?
No.
So how do you know he wasn't willing to talk to you?
Due to the actions and the demeanor by Joe Slay, he shut John down. Joe was not nice to John at the execution of the warrant. And I believe the words were, "Where's the effing money, John?" And at that point, or sometime shortly thereafter, John asked for his attorney.
Okay. But it'd be fair to say that nobody ever asked to interview him after that.
Correct.
Miss Smith, in her account, had described Mr. Artuso as being dressed in jeans, correct?
Yes.
And I think wearing a baseball cap.
Yes.
And I think she said he was not dressed professionally, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Did he have a badge of some kind displayed? Was he carrying a firearm with him?
No, he didn't. He didn't have a. He had the badge for the housing inspector. He had like a little thing on him, said John Artuso.
Okay.
And it was but he was dressed on it. He wasn't dressed like a housing inspector. He had sunglasses on. He had this hat on, like he was macho and like.
Do you remember what he was wearing?
He was wearing jeans that day. This is why I said he wasn't acting professional. And he came there that day, he wasn't acting professional.
So is there anything else about that day? He was driving a city truck. You said he was wearing jeans, like a hat with sunglasses on them. Yeah. He had his, like, was it a badge or was it a shirt that said housing inspector?
No, it was just a regular shirt that day. He didn't have a housing inspector shirt on that day.
At any time, did either yourself or anyone else involved in the investigation go to the Circle K on Woodman for the purposes of seeing if there was any surveillance video available that would have shown Mr. Artuso on September 15, 2017?
No.
Okay. Do you recall seeing such video at the trial of the matter in September of 2018?
Yes.
Okay. And it captured Mr. Artuso for that day in the manner in which he was dressed that day, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. So apparently the surveillance video footage was available if somebody had asked for it, right?
Yes.
And about what time of the day did John do this to you?
We left after inspection. Inspection was probably like maybe, I don't know, 20 minutes long, so I'd say around 10 something, because I just dropped myself, no, probably 11, because when we left, him and Julie were talking about the office, and he was just giving my niece the worst looks ever.
So did your investigation reveal to you that Mr. Artuso couldn't have completed his inspections until at least 11:45 a.m. that day?
Yes.
All right, so you had a working understanding that the alleged assault was supposed to have occurred sometime between 11 a.m. and noon, but you also knew from your interviews that Mr. Artuso had been engaged in his duties as a housing inspector at least until 11:45 a.m., correct?
Yes.
And that entire time, Mr. Artuso was in company of others such as Julie Such, correct, as he was conducting his inspections?
I would presume at least Julie Such, yes.
Okay. And Miss Smith's story was that she had left the inspection at Unit 6, dropped her sister off at home, correct?
Yes.
And then was driving to a Circle K gas station convenience store in town, correct?
Yes.
On Woodman Avenue?
Yes.
And that it was there that she ran into Mr. Artuso and he indicated that they needed to return to the unit. Is that what she described?
I believe she said she was not at the Circle K. She was traveling along West Avenue and a side street on the 4800 block of West Avenue and encountered Mr. Artuso.
Okay.
At an intersection. Specifically which one, I don't recall.
So you saw him earlier in the day and did inspection with him, and then you guys left the apartment?
Yeah, we all left. I took my sister home. Jennifer took her own vehicle.
So then what happens? You all leave the apartment, then when is the next time you see Mr. Artuso?
I dropped my sister off at home, and then I went back up to Circle K on 84 because I had to get a couple of things. I'm not going to go to my sister's house because my husband's selling her a house on my contract. And I see him at the stop sign at West Avenue 48th, and he like motions for me to roll my window down, and I did. I mean, he's been my niece for 5 years. He's never hurt my niece ever, that I know of.
Mm-hmm. So you're at the corner of West and 48th, you're at a stop sign, he pulls up near you, next to you, and tells you to roll down your window. And what does he say?
He asked me if I could get back to the apartment because Julie was disputing some things to say my son caused them or that my son, I don't know, made them happen. And I said, sure. And I believed him. Julie is a liar. People don't even know. I've got evidence.
So whatever her story, at least at its core, involved her leaving Unit 6, driving her sister home, and then traveling to another location in town where she allegedly ran into Mr. Artuso, correct?
Yes.
And all that had to happen sometime after the inspection of Unit 6, correct?
Yes.
But you knew from the interviews you conducted that Mr. Artuso was conducting inspections at least until 11:45 a.m. The phone records also revealed phone calls that occurred in the time period between 11 a.m. and 12 noon, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we see a number of those on Plaintiff's Exhibit 8, correct?
Yes.
And how many calls were there involving Mr. Artuso's personal cell phone between 11 a.m. and 12 noon on September 15, 2017?
5.
11:45. And when's the first one?
At 11:02 a.m.
Okay, how long did that call last?
5 minutes.
Okay. And when was the next call?
At 11:38 a.m.
Okay, and how long did that call last?
2 minutes.
Okay. And then the next call, sir?
11:50.
Okay. And how long did that last?
1 minute.
Okay. So up to 11:51.
Yes.
So we have work activity lasting until 11:45 a.m. and we also have cell phone activity within that same period of time, taking us up to 11:51 a.m., correct?
Yes.
Do you recall looking at obtaining Mr. Artuso's Verizon phone records for his city-issued phone as well?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Feld, are you familiar with Plaintiff's Exhibit 9?
I am.
Okay, and is that the cell phone record for the cell phone activity involving Mr. Artuso's work cell phone for September? Does it include that for September 15, 2017?
Yes, it does.
Okay, and does that report also indicate cell phone activity during the relevant time period of 11 a.m. to 12 noon on September 15, 2017?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, let's look at his personal cell phone records. Is there a call on Plaintiff's Exhibit 8 at 12:06?
Yes.
Okay. And in the course of your investigation, am I correct that you came to understand that that call was between Mr. Artuso and another Ashtabula City employee named Wayne Howell?
I don't remember that.
Okay. Well, you recall that the investigation revealed Mr. Artuso's work activity throughout the day involving meeting with Wayne Howell concerned some tire dumping, illegal tire dumping?
Yes.
And you recall that that occurred around noon or a little after noon on September 15, 2017?
Yes.
And let me ask you, have you seen Plaintiff's Exhibit 10 before?
I believe I have.
Am I correct? Plaintiff's Exhibit 10 are part of the work records for Mr. Artuso that were obtained as part of this investigation concerning his work activity on September 15, 2017?
Yes.
And these work records would have been obtained in December of 2017, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And this particular record details a number of inspections that Mr. Artuso completed on September 15, 2017?
Yes.
And I think if you add up all the units that he inspected, there's a total of 24 units at 7 different properties that he inspected. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you recall looking at this record in December of 2017?
I don't specifically remember that.
Okay. You'd agree that this record cast some doubt on the story that Judy Smith told, correct?
They could have, yes.
As well as Mr. Artuso's personal cell phone records, those certainly cast doubt on the story that she was telling, correct?
Yes.
So what you knew at that time when the matter was submitted to the county prosecutor was that Mr. Artuso's work records and his cell phone records refuted that he could have committed this assault as alleged by Judy Smith between the time of 11 a.m. and noon on September 15, 2017, correct?
Yes.
Do you recall downloading the AT&T and Verizon phone records to the flash drive that was initially given to the Ashtabula County Prosecutor?
I don't remember that.
Let me understand that. You don't remember one way or the other, or you don't think you did that?
I don't remember if I did it or not.
Okay. But certainly that's something that should have been included in the information that went initially to the county prosecutor, correct?
Yes.
Okay. As well as Mr. Artuso's work records, correct?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Okay.
Your Honor, after Mr. Artuso's indictment in January, and obviously Mr. Artuso retained counsel, attorney Tom Simon. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And Mr. Simon served a discovery request upon your office that I think is fairly routine for criminal cases. Do you recall that?
I don't specifically recall that request, but I do know that Mr. Simon submitted, as any good defense attorney would do, is a discovery request.
Okay. And let me have the court reporter publish, and hopefully you received a copy as well of the discovery packet that you sent to Attorney Simon in February of 2018. Okay. So looking at, and if we look at the first page of this, there's a cover letter dated February 20th of 2018. Do you see that?
Yes.
And if we go towards the end of this document, Your Honor, the last two pages, the first page is captioned Notice of Submission and Intention to Use Evidence.
Yes.
And then attached to that is the Exhibit A that's referenced in that document, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Exhibit A sort of details all of the evidence that your office produced at that time in response to Mr. Simon's request for discovery.
Correct. My office had an open discovery policy. Whatever we had, they received.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And that's exactly correct. So what you produced to Mr. Simon at that time was everything that you had been given by the Ashtabula Police Department up to that point in time. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay, Your Honor, I'd just like to go fairly quickly through Exhibit A just to make sure we know what each of these items is. And the first thing mentioned there are photos of Judy Smith's text messages, correct?
Yes.
And I've seen these. I haven't marked them for today. We're not going to look at them today, but there were a couple of dozen, I think, snapshots or whatever from Judy Smith's phone concerning text messages she had sent or received. Is that your recollection?
Yes.
Okay. The next thing, it says Smith, October, September files.
Yeah, I see that.
And I think those were emails or something to that effect from Julie Such. Do you recall?
I don't recall. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. The next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items are notices of one kind or another pertaining to the Bunker Hill apartment that Judy Smith's son occupied. Is that fair?
I believe that is the case. Correct.
Okay, various violations, repair notices, pets, notices to vacate, those kinds of things, right?
Right.
Okay. Then the next item, it says this included an initial discovery. You see that?
Yes.
Okay, and that's what those are. Those are videotaped interviews that were part of the investigation, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then there's a thing called Doc 052.
Yeah, I see that. I see it. What is your question?
What do you know what that is?
If I look at it, I couldn't tell you what it is, but as I'm looking at all of the exhibits you submitted, I believe those are some emails from Julie Such.
Okay. And then next is incident 1704651, redacted, right?
Right.
And we'll come back to that in a second. And then next we have initial disk packet. And again, is that a discovery packet?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what that is, sir. That could be actually the. Yeah, I don't know what that is.
Janet, do you have initial disk packet marked as an exhibit?
I believe so.
Could you put that up? Your Honor, do you see exhibit up on the screen?
Yes.
And so Doc 052 appears to be another email between Julie Such and Detective Doug Hollis at the Ashtabula Police Department. Do you see that?
I see the exhibit. I see that it's an email from Julia Such to Detective Hollis and to Detective Felt.
Okay, thank you. As we go down the list, we have inspection results.
Okay.
And then we have Smith, October, September again. You recall if that was more emails?
I don't recall, I'm sorry.
Okay, and then we have an interview by Special Agent Fortunato. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, and that was the entirety of everything that you sent to Mr. Simon at that time, because that's all that you had to give him, right?
Correct.
Now, Your Honor, if I could, if we could take a minute and look at the incident report that was produced in February 2018, and it's listed Incident Report 1704651. Do you have a copy of that there with you?
Yes.
Okay, and it says redacted because what happened here was any information pertaining to the theft offense was redacted, correct?
Correct.
All right. Do you recall if your office did the redaction or if you received this as a redacted report?
My office would have done the redaction.
Okay. And this is the entire report that you produced at that time because that's all you'd been given, correct?
As far as I recall, correct.
And if we scroll through that, Janet, do we have the ability to scroll through that?
Yes.
We see that this is a 17-page report. Do you see that one of 17 on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, and much of the first 6 pages is redacted because, again, that contained information concerning relevant to the theft offense, correct?
Correct.
And then after we get past those first 6 pages, on page 7, the narrative report begins. Is that how your copy looks?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and this is the beginning of the narrative report, and it's discussing activity that occurred on December 18th of 2017. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And if we scroll through the balance of this report, and to see the balance of the narrative that was given to you at that time, I believe it's, again, more summaries of interviews that have been conducted. Is that how your report reads?
Yes. I mean, what I have in front of me is the exact same thing that is being shown on the screen. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. Now, you'll agree with me, Your Honor, there's no mention in here of any cell phone records that may have been obtained at that point in time, correct?
I don't, other than the photographs of her cell phone, that being Judy Smith's cell phone, I don't see anything else that indicates anything about other cell phone records.
Okay, so there's no reference in the incident report that was made available to you and to your office about the fact that the detectives, and in particular Detective Felt, had obtained Mr. Artuso's personal and work cell phone records in December of 2017, correct?
The report does not make any mention of other cell phone records, correct?
Okay. And there's no mention in this report as it was produced to you at that time that Detective Felt and the other detectives had secured Mr. Artuso's work records and his inspection records in December of 2017 concerning the alleged date of the incident, September 15, 2017, correct?
It does appear to be correct. There's no mention made of it in the report, but the discovery packet does include inspection results or reports. So, but to answer your question, I don't believe the narrative of the police report makes any mention of the inspection report.
Okay, well, let's put that exhibit up for a second. Janet, if you could put up Plaintiff's Exhibit 20, please. And what we have marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 20 is on the City of Ashtabula letterhead, and it's concerning 5927 Jefferson Avenue, correct?
Correct.
And this appears to be It says results of your inspection were found to be conditional, and this is signed by Mr. Artuso. Well, certainly the grand jury should have been allowed to hear the entirety of the evidence that was available to Detective Felt. Is that correct?
The grand jury was to hear all of the evidence that I had available at the time for consideration. Correct.
Okay. And what we've learned in retrospect is that former Detective Felt had information in his possession, including the cell phone records and work records, as well as additional testimony that he did not relate to the grand jury during that proceeding on January 30th, 2018, correct?
Your question assumes that Detective Felt had documents in his possession. I don't know that. I don't know if he had documents that relating to the inspections or other cell phone records or what have you in his possession at the time of the grand jury presentation. So I can't answer it that way.
Okay. Well, if the investigative file reflects that Detective Felt, former Detective Felt, in fact, had those things in his possession as early as December of 2017, that's information he should have presented to the grand jury, correct?
That's information that I would have expected to be presented to my office, assuming that he was in possession of those records prior to grand jury testimony and presentation, and that I would have made available to the grand jury.
Okay. Let's do this. Janet, can you put up Plaintiff's Exhibit 3?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, Your Honor, I'm showing you what's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 3 in an earlier deposition. In fact, I think it was former Detective Felt's deposition. And this is another copy of Incident Report 17-04651. And if we could go to page 20 of that exhibit.
Okay, there it is.
Okay, and do you see that on the screen in front of you there, Your Honor?
Yes.
And if we scroll to the bottom, this particular page appears to have been presented by Lieutenant Doug Hollis. You see that?
Yes.
Go back up to the top of that page, please, Janet. And this says on Tuesday, December 19th, it says 2107. I assume it means 2017. I spoke with Mary Church at the Ashtabula Housing Department and requested records pertaining to inspections conducted by John Artuso on September 15, 2017, and the records pertaining to the inspections conducted at 5927 Jefferson Avenue and 711 Bunker Hill Road. Records are maintained through a record-keeping system called Zone Pro. I also took possession of the city-owned cellular telephone and tablet used by Mr. Artuso for his duties. As housing inspector, I obtained authorization from City Manager Jim Timonere to search the electronic devices. The phone was electronically searched with Secure View, and the report was placed in the case file. Both items will be entered into evidence in case they are needed in the future. On Wednesday, December 20, 2017, I received the requested records from Mary Church. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So this would indicate that, in fact, by December 20th, 2017, the detectives had, in fact, obtained copies of Mr. Artuso's work records for September 15th, 2017, correct?
Correct.
And let me ask you, Your Honor, and please take a minute and compare this. This particular report, and again, can we scroll down to the bottom, Janet, is dated December 20th of 2017. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, but what I did want to ask you, Your Honor, if you look at the incident report as it was produced by your office in February of 2018, I think you will find that this particular page, dated December 20th, 2017, is not included in that copy of the report. Is that correct?
Yes, the report that we produced to Mr. Simon in response to discovery that we've talked about, that redacted report does not include Lieutenant Hollis's December 20, 2017 narrative.
And Your Honor, you'd agree with me that based upon this page that we just looked at from December 20th, 2017, there's no question that the detectives were in possession of Mr. Artuso's work records by December 20th of 2017, correct?
Yes, it appears to be the case that they were in possession of those records.
And again, certainly that should have been part of former Detective Felt's presentation to the grand jury on January 30th, 2018, correct?
In response to my questions whether there were any further investigation performed, I would have expected an answer along the lines that we did, or Lieutenant Hollis did obtain these records.
Okay.
I think I asked you before, but you told me you believe Detective Hollis and Detective Sleddy asked you for Mr. Artuso's work tablet and cell phone, correct?
That's correct.
Were those also the same individuals who requested Mr. Artuso's Zone Pro records?
I think I just met with Hollis about the Zone Pro records, not Sleddy.
Okay. And did Detective Hollis ask you in any way to help him understand or walk through the Zone Pro records to sort of retrace Mr. Artuso's work activity throughout the day on September 15, 2017?
I can't remember.
Okay. Or do you remember if you just printed the records off and handed them over?
No, I'm sure we talked. I know we talked about it.
The nature of the records and what they indicated and that type of thing?
Yes.
Okay. Were you aware at the point in time that Detective Felt presented the matter to the Ashtabula County Prosecutor that he was in possession of both work and personal cell phone records for Mr. Artuso?
I'm aware of that now. I wasn't aware of that at the time.
Were you aware at the time that former Detective Felt presented the matter to the Ashtabula County Prosecutor's Office that the detective was in possession of Mr. Artuso's work records for the date in question?
At the time, was I aware of that? No, I wasn't.
Would you have expected that having gathered that evidence, that some effort had been made to analyze that evidence before presenting the matter to the Ashtabula County Prosecutor?
I'm sorry, your question was, would I expect that to have been happened?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I would.
You'd agree with me, Chief, that in gathering evidence and determining to present a matter to the county prosecutor, it would not be proper for the lead detective, to ignore exculpatory evidence that might indicate that no crime occurred or that a particular individual did not commit the crime.
I would agree.
Were you asked to testify before the grand jury in this case?
I don't remember if I did or if I did not.
You don't remember your specific testimony in this case?
I don't.
Okay. But if you had the phone records, it would have included the phone records?
Yes.
If you had the work records, it would have included the work records?
Yes.
Okay. It would have included an analysis of those records?
Yes.
So you'd have to see the grand jury transcript to recall what it was specifically that you said?
Yes.
If you appeared at all?
Correct.
Though before you ever get into the grand jury,
okay,
you want to hear the entirety of the story to know whether or not you should be even presenting the matter before the grand jury. Is that fair?
Of course, yes.
Okay. Let's go ahead and just turn to the grand jury transcript if we could. And I think to page 16 of the grand jury transcript.
Okay.
And you ask former Detective Felt if he has, at this point, he's described the allegations that Judy Smith has made. And you ask him, have you done anything further with respect to investigating this alleged rape? And then he proceeds to answer about how he's tried to corroborate certain facts. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay. Now, am I correct, Your Honor? You were asking former Detective Felt at that point to discuss the entirety of his investigation up to that point in time?
I mean, I asked him mean, the question is what it is. It's asking him whether he did anything further with respect to the investigation.
Okay, and whatever he had done, you expected him to testify to that, correct?
Yes, anything further. So whatever he had done, I would ask him to testify to that, correct?
Now, Your Honor, if we look towards the bottom of page 16 and at line 22, you asked the question, what about from Mr. Artuso? And I think you're referencing documentation. Was there any documentation that was completed by Mr. Artuso? Do you see that?
Yes.
Am I correct that that is what you were asking the witness for?
Yes.
Okay. And the answer the former Detective Felt gave was Mr. Artuso did not produce any documents to even assert that he was present for the rental inspection. Basically didn't go through whatever steps is necessary in his position to do a report or document anything that he was present at the apartment for. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, I take it, Your Honor, at that time when the former Detective Felt gave that answer, you were not aware that he was in possession of Mr. Artuso's work records for September 15, 2007, that in fact showed all the inspections that he conducted that day, were you?
I don't recall. I mean, I'm being honest, I don't recall.
And I appreciate that, Your Honor, but let me ask you this. Is certainly if those records had been presented to you and you were aware those records existed, you certainly would not have let that answer stand knowing that it was not true, correct?
I would have specifically asked him about those records.
Yes, and because the information that he's giving there is suggesting that there are no such records simply isn't true. You came to learn that fact, correct?
Yeah, I mean, for that particular date, if there are records for that particular date, and yes, I did come to learn that there were records. I just don't recall at this present time whether that's that date there were records that existed or created by him.
Okay. And certainly if former Detective Felt had been in possession of those records when he brought the matter to you, you expected that he would turn those records over. Is that fair?
Yes, I would have expected that whatever records existed would have been submitted.
Okay. Now, further down on page 17, you asked the question, so is it fair to say, based on your discussions with Miss Church, who is Mr. Artuso's supervisor, that a housing inspector is supposed to document inspections that took place? Do you see that?
Yes.
And former Detective Felt's answer was yes. And then you asked the question, but in this case on September 17th, and I think you were referencing the 15th, Mr. Artuso did not do that. Do you see that?
Yes.
So, Your Honor, here again, am I correct from your question, you were under the understanding that there were no inspection records created by Mr. Artuso for September 15, 2017. Is that fair?
At the time of the grand jury proceeding, it appears to be, yes.
Okay.
Did you ever tell any of the detectives for the Ashtabula Detective Bureau that Mr. Artuso was rarely where he was supposed to be when performing his duties as housing inspector?
I don't recall that.
You don't recall him making such a statement?
No.
I appreciate that you had information that Mr. Artuso wasn't always where he was supposed to be, but having been his supervisor for a number of years, would you believe that to be a fair statement that Mr. Artuso was rarely where he was supposed to be?
No.
If he was that bad, you would have fired him, right? Or asked Mr. Timonere to fire him?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever tell Detective Felt or any other detective in the Ashtabula Detective Bureau that Mr. Artuso had not completed inspection records for September 15, 2017?
No, I don't recall.
And just as a point of reference, that was the date that Judy Smith alleged she was attacked following an inspection. Okay? Do you understand that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Were you ever asked to help construct a timeline of Mr. Artuso's work activities for September 15, 2017?
No, I was just asked for the schedule for that day.
Okay. The records that you did produce for September 15, 2017, do you recall if those records were located where they were supposed to be located?
They were in Zone Pro.
Okay. And is that where you expected to find them? Yes.
Yes.
Thanks.
And then you ask below that, again, at line 16, is there anything else that you did as part of an investigation, this investigation that we haven't discussed today? Do you see that?
Yes.
So here again, you're asking former Detective Felt, tell us anything else that you may have done in this case, correct?
Correct.
All right. And his answer is no. Do you see that?
Correct. Yes.
And similar to the work records, Your Honor, I take it that obviously you were not aware at that time that former Detective Felt was also in possession of Mr. Artuso's cell phone records for his personal cell phone?
If there was no testimony at grand jury on the cell phone records, then that would be the case. Correct.
And you were not aware that former Detective Felt at that time also already in possession of the cell phone records for Mr. Artuso's work phone?
Again, same answer. If it wasn't provided in the way of testimony at grand jury, then I was not aware.
Okay. And similarly, you would not have been aware that that Detective Felt was in possession of Mr. Artuso's work laptop computer?
That would be the same answer, correct.
Okay. Because again, if you knew that and Mr. Former Detective Felt gave that answer, you would have asked him specifically about those items, correct?
I would have expected an answer to be, yes, I did do more as part of the investigation.
Okay.
And here's what I did.
Based upon what we've seen in the investigative file, what we know from the other testimony, that did not, what was reported to you did not include the cell phone records or the work records, correct?
That it appears to be that case, yes.
Okay. And former Detective Felt's answers did not include discussion of his investigation as to the cell phone records and the work records, correct?
Based on my review of the grand jury transcript, correct.
Is it your understanding that a prosecutor is not required to put on exculpatory information to the grand jury?
I'm, under Brady, prosecutors are required to present exculpatory information to the defendant and the defense attorney.
Right.
And, but to answer your question, whether a prosecutor is required or not required to present to the grand jury, that may be the case, but that's not how I ran the grand jury. I personally presented virtually every case during my tenure as prosecutor to the grand jury. And if there was exculpatory information that I was aware of, the grand jury needed to be aware of that. I would have made it known.
Okay. All right. So whether, in other words, whether it was required or not, it was your practice to put it on if you had it.
Yes.
In his testimony, Mr. Felt testified that while he had the phone records, he had not reviewed them at the time of the submission of the case to the prosecutor's office at the time of the grand jury testimony. Since he was unaware of the content of the records, even though he was physically in possession of them, would you have expected him to testify regarding their import to the investigation?
He didn't do anything relating to those items he had in his possession. I wouldn't have expected him to testify to those, but I would have at least expected him to say that he obtained those during the investigation, part of his testimony.
Now, the grand jury came back with a true bill of indictment, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Artuso was indicted for rape and kidnapping, correct?
Yeah.
And I think sexual battery may have been another one.
Right.
Could you please tell us, if you recall, what Mr. Artuso was facing by way of a potential criminal penalty if he were to be convicted on all counts of that indictment?
I think he was facing 15 to life.
Okay, so potentially life imprisonment.
Right. I think with the kidnapping charge, I think he was facing, as I'm recalling as best as I can, 15 years to life.
Okay.
But wouldn't you, in your own mind, conclude that there was probable cause to believe that a crime had been committed and Mr. Artuso had committed that crime prior to even presenting the file to the county prosecutor?
In this case, it was submitted to Nick Irochi's office for review for probable cause determination.
So you're saying you made no probable cause determination on your own?
Yes.
I believe that the Ashtabula Police Department felt, based on their interview of Judy Smith and the investigation that they had completed prior to the grand jury presentation, that Mr. Artuso committed the offense, that there was probable cause.
Do you now understand that based upon what was the working theory at the time, that the assault had occurred sometime between 11 a.m. and noon on September 15, 2017, that the phone records demonstrated that the crime could not have occurred as reported?
I would agree with that.
And given what was reflected by the phone records and the work records and the working understanding of a crime occurring between the hours of 11 a.m. and noon on September 15, 2017, there would not have been probable cause to believe that Mr. Artuso had committed that crime at the point in time that was presented to the county prosecutor's office, correct?
Yes.
These people are sick.
Has there been any effort by the Ashtabula Police Department to review the Judy, what I'll refer to as the Judy Smith allegation investigation?
I'm sorry, as far as what? As far as how the investigation was handled?
As far as the investigation was handled, correct.
We've reviewed it and discussed it.
Okay. Did you identify any deficiencies in the investigation?
Yes.
What deficiencies did you identify?
I think that the failure to, in a more timely manner, go to the crime scene was a problem, and the failure to create a timeline with the phone records, I think, was a problem.
And I think we touched a little bit about the deficiencies in Lieutenant Saletti's performance. He was removed from his position as commander of the Detective Bureau.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, Mr. Feld, I want to ask you about your own separation of employment from Ashtabula Police Department. I understand there was an allegation of funds missing from a box of some kind. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And were you ultimately asked to resign from the Ashtabula Police Department?
I was offered the ability to resign, which I accepted.
Did you have financial problems that they thought were related to the missing money?
Yes.
And your financial problems had been ongoing for some time, correct?
Yes.
Number of years?
Yes.
And it's reflected in your file, correct?
Yes.
Did anybody relate to Mr. Artuso or his counsel the fact that you had had these ongoing financial problems?
No.
Certainly you didn't.
No, of course not.
Do you still have your police commission?
No.
Let me ask you, among those individuals that were accused, did you become aware of an investigation involving former Detective William Feld?
I believe there was an investigation into him, yes.
Okay, and that involved the theft of drug buy money from the Detective Bureau?
I believe there was missing money in within evidence. I don't know if it was specifically drug buy money or what that case was.
Missing money from the evidence room. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay. And do you recall when you became aware of that investigation?
Gosh, I don't.
Okay. Did that ultimately, to your understanding, lead to the termination of former Detective Feld's employment with the city?
It led to the end of his employment. I don't know if I don't recall whether he was terminated or resigned.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the impetus for that was the investigation?
Correct.
Thank you. Were you aware of former Detective William Felt's ongoing personal financial problems?
I was aware he had financial problems.
I recall when you first became aware of that.
I don't.
Does the city maintain a policy concerning, particularly within the police department, that members of the police department maintain their financial affairs in proper order?
I believe that's in the police department's policy handbook.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with the exact section, but...
Okay. Do you know what the purpose of that policy is?
It's just an internal document of conduct for our police officers.
Do you know why it's a good idea to have such a policy?
Yes.
What's your understanding as to why it's a good idea to have such a policy?
To keep police officers honest.
Okay.
Keep out bad individuals.
Let me ask you about former Detective William Felt. My understanding is that former Detective Felt resigned after being accused of taking money from the evidence room. Am I correct?
Not from the evidence room.
Okay, taking money from where then?
From the Detective Bureau, it would be the what's considered drug buy money.
Okay, and who had, if you will, overall supervisory responsibility over this drug buy money?
Well, understand that was during a time of transition, so things have changed drastically since then. So at that point in time, there actually was no supervisory role over that money. Come to find out, the actual key for that was accessible to anybody in the Bureau. It's a problem that I was unaware of. I hadn't been in that safe, so, for me, it was out of sight, out of mind.
Okay.
Detective Palenkas had mentioned to me at one point in time, I can't remember when it was, to do an audit check. Matter of fact, I think it was in December of the prior year of when Detective Feld resigned. And he was a little concerned. He wanted an audit done on it. So at that time, I just put it by the wayside at that time. I ignored it. And I waited. And then I think it was February, he asked me again. So this time I did an audit because I had him, I had Lieutenant Hollis and I. So I figured I'll just do an audit while I have all of us here. So I did an audit in front of everyone, and it came up like $760 or $780 short. And I'm like, oh, this is way too much. So I reported it to the chief. We already had speculation because we knew he was having financial difficulty. So we waited, gave ample time for it to reappear. It wasn't reappearing. The chief had a meeting with all of us and said that, somebody needs to find that money somewhere, or he was going to have BCI come in and investigate, which we were all for at the time.
Okay.
So time went on. Lieutenant Saletti went and had conferred with me a few times about certain things that Buddy had said, which led him to believe that the money's going to reappear. So on the day that the money did reappear, Saletti and I was down in the OIC office, and we were talking about it for, I don't know, probably a good 40 minutes, 45 minutes. And as we left that office, we're walking down the hallway, and here came Detective Fell right behind us. He says, "Hey, I was just looking for you," referring to me. Mm-hmm. And he says, "Hey, you never believe I found that money." And I just looked at Saletti and just shook my head. And it's like, okay. He says, let's hear the story. So he tells me the story. And so I said, okay, let me see the case file. So I start reading the case file, and I read his statement, and it contradicted what he was telling me.
Okay.
Which, already was raising red flags with me. So I immediately took that money, went into Lieutenant Parker Mackey's office, and Lieutenant Slutty and I and Parker Mackey counted that money right there, and it was $700. We resealed the envelope. I maintained custody of it. We let Chief Stahl know everything, and then we ended up going home for the day, and Slutty ended up calling me, and he goes, hey, those evidence envelopes have serial numbers on them, right? Mm-hmm. Like, they most certainly do. He says, and they got pull tabs, which pull tabs are serialized with the same number as the back. I said, Joe, I know right where you're going with this. So we both went back to the office and searched a garbage can in the detective bureau, and there was a pull tab. So he sealed it that day that he gave it to us.
Okay.
So yeah, he was had.
Okay.
So that's.
And so a couple of things I want to understand here. So it sounds like this was either a box or loose money that was kept in a safe somewhere.
It was kept in a locked safe. The unfortunate thing is they kept the key between their desks, which is no longer accessible.
And the money was there for the purposes of using an undercover drug buys, correct?
Yes.
And how was there a record? Did somebody keep a running total of how much money should be in this safe?
Poorly.
Okay, poorly. And that was hence the audit, right?
Correct. And now there's an actual ledger book in there.
Okay.
Everything's documented with 2 signatures.
When you became aware of the investigation into former Detective Felt, were you made aware that he had had ongoing financial problems for a number of years?
I was made aware of Detective Felt's financial issues. It wasn't long before I left the prosecutor's office. I was not made aware of that and the issues that he was having. I was not aware of any of that for the most part during this trial or up during this case. And then I come to find out later that he was having some difficulties, and I think that all came to light right around the time that he left his position.
Okay. And Your Honor, I'll tell you that I had a chance to discuss this with former Detective Felt and a number of other individuals throughout this case. And did you come to learn that former Detective Felt's financial problems included a misuse of a government credit card during some out-of-state training?
I was not aware of that, and this is the first time I've heard of it.
Okay. Is that something you should have been made aware of?
For purposes of what?
Well, Detective Felt was the lead investigator on any number of felony matters, right?
Okay, so you're not talking about this case, you're talking in general. Should I have been made aware of that?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor. And Jeff?
Yeah, I probably should have been made aware of that if that was the case.
Because that would be a concern if former Detective Felt's credibility is going to be called into question because of his financial problems. Is that fair?
That's fair. And I'm not quite sure if your description of Detective Felt as being the lead investigator is a correct one either. What came to light at trial was that there was no lead investigator.
And I would represent to you, Your Honor, as I've asked each of the detectives, including Detective Felt and his former supervisors, they've all indicated to me that former Detective Felt, in fact, was the lead investigator for actually both matters, Judy Smith's claims and the theft defense. Would you have a different opinion?
Yeah, I would, based on the testimony at trial, because it came to light at trial that none of them were the primary or lead investigator, which was information that I gleaned from the trial that I wasn't happy about.
Because that's highly unusual for there not to be a lead investigator, correct?
It was unusual for them all the officers to admit that there was no lead investigator, when I believe that Detective Felt was the lead investigator sitting table with the prosecution.
Is it your recollection, Your Honor, that Detective Felt expressly stated during the Judy Smith trial that he was not the lead investigator?
The transcript will speak for itself, but my best recollection is not only did Detective Felt say that, but the other officers and detectives said the same, that there was no lead investigator.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate that.
Just one more thing.
How has it destroyed your life?
Well, I lost my home, my family, my job, my career. I was basically chased out of town, marked as a rapist, splattered all over every newspaper across the country for 9 months, day after day, with a life sentence hanging over my head for a crime I didn't commit. In the process of all that, I was also accused of the theft, and it's a lot to deal with.
Sure.
My career is my life. I took an oath for a reason. It's hard to deal with. I'm always, every time I hear a door shut, I'm jumpy. I'm looking out the windows. The people that I trusted, they were supposed to be my brothers and sisters, are the ones that came after me. So now I'm always looking at police officers like, are you one of the good guys or one of the bad guys? Which I shouldn't, I really shouldn't, but I just never know what's going to happen, That's one aspect. Being able to ask somebody out on a date, that I don't see that, very easily done, without it being questioned. And looking for a job, same thing. I know I have to live with this for the rest of my life, John. And I just don't feel I deserved it. I'm a good person. I know you don't know me, but I am.
So, certainly when Judy comes to the police department with an allegation of rape, they're going to have to investigate it.
Yes.
Right. And same thing for the theft claim. When
yes.
It comes to them, they got to investigate it.
And I understand that. What I would have hoped from them was that they would have been fair-minded and not just out to get me. Listen, I worked with these guys for 7 years.
When was the last time that you asked a woman out on a date?
I haven't.
And when you say chased out of town, is that just your being uncomfortable being in town?
Yes, being looked at, talked about. I felt very unwelcomed, and then I was scared. I was afraid that, look at what they've already done. And God forbid I'm driving down the street and something else happens. To this day, I'm afraid to go out there. I usually when we come in for our depositions, it's Route 11 to Tom's office and then right back on Route 11. I won't even drive through town.
There's talk in these documents about PTSD. Tell me about that.
Post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah, I know what it is. Tell me how you experience it.
Well, I could tell you what the psychiatrists and the doctors tell me, that it's a combination of depression, anxiety, and that's how they've determined that from talking to me in our sessions.
And I appreciate that answer. Maybe a poor question like that deserved that kind of answer. But what I want to understand is, what's your symptomology?
Well, as we were just earlier discussing, at nighttime, when I'm by myself, whether it be during the day or at night, and I start thinking about how hard I've worked to get to where I was and where I'm at today. You know, it's hard to accept. It's a very depressing situation. It's like you being an attorney your whole life and then they take that away from you. I was a police officer first, before even a housing inspector. I took an oath to protect life, property, and the Constitution. Okay, I feel very strongly about that. And that was taken away from me, and it's hard to deal with that sometimes.
Okay, and I get all that. So what I want to know is what else?
What else? What else?
Yeah, what else?
You know, I've lost everything. I don't.
John, let me state it to you a little bit differently. And
I don't know what you're asking, John, but
yeah, and that's why I'm going to ask you a different question. Because someday if this case doesn't resolve, it could end up in front of a jury, right? And so today is my opportunity to find out what you're going to tell the jury, my opportunity to find out what you claim in terms of injuries. So what I want to hear from you now, what I'd like to hear from you now, what I need to hear from you now, is what you would tell the jury if you're on the witness stand and your lawyer's asking you about how this has affected you, what you've suffered, what do you experience in your daily life, all the things that...
I can't... okay, here, you want depression? Let me tell you depression, okay? I can't even ask...
You guys can't talk at the same time, so let him ask the question, then you can answer.
I'm sorry.
I know it's hard, but you gotta let him ask the question.
I can't even ask a girl out if I wanted to, okay? Because what's the first thing she's gonna do? She's gonna look me up, and she's gonna see this, and she's gonna have her opinions of what happened. That's just one of the things. I go get a job, they'll do the same thing. No matter what I do, this is gonna follow me for the rest of my life, and I don't deserve it. I didn't do it. So, John, I don't know what it is you want me to say.
I want you to say what you've just said and whatever else you have to say.
I just feel that my life is destroyed. Emotionally, psychologically, financially. All because I wanted to do the right things in life. I'm sorry, it's been weighing on me. I'm sorry.
It's all right, I get it. Need to take a break?
Yes, please.
For nothing is secret that shall not be made manifest, neither anything hid that shall not be known and come abroad.